Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the MedTech Impact Podcast, where you get to hear from leaders and innovators who are shaping the future of medical technology. I'm Kyle Cruz.
And I'm Richard Meiklejohn.
And we're your hosts of the show.
So, today on the MedTech Impact Podcast, we're delighted to be joined by two wonderful guests. We have Andrew Goldsmith, Medical Director of UltraSight, and Ramya Singh, Chief Commercial Officer of UltraSight. Welcome to the show.
Thank you
for having us.
Well, this is, again, amazing that we've got both of you on. We've got a super exciting topic here. And Andrew's going to pick up the fact that you are the Vice Chair of Academic Affairs for the Department of Emergency Medicine at Leahy Hospital. So, big shout out to the crew there. But yeah, again, from the UltraSight perspective, super interesting what you're doing because it has AI immersed into it. And so it's going to be, that buzz thing. Everyone wants to know about how you're using AI. But before we get into that, we do like to set the stage for the audience. So maybe, Andrew, you could kick us off and tell us, what is that big problem you're looking to solve through UltraSight?
Thank you for the question, Rich. The problem here that we're facing here is that there is a significant shortage of cardiac sonographers around the country. And as a result of that, every patient that comes into the hospital that needs an echo is significantly delayed in getting that echo. This problem isn't just an inpatient problem, though. The problem is also on the outpatient side. You can find hospitals that sometimes have a 9-month delay in obtaining an echo for their patients. And you can imagine the consequences for patient care as a result of that.
And so I was looking a bit of background to this. I think there's a study from the American Journal of Emergency Medicine that found that only 40% of emergency medicine residents reported feeling confident in performing basic point of care ultrasound services and procedures. So I can kind of see this point here. You're talking about that lack or the challenges in the workforce piece. What are some of the statistics you're kind of honing in on beyond that?
So there is basically been a significant decrease in the amount of cardiac sonographers, while the amount of echoes needed has been upticking about 3 to 4% per year since 2010 when you look at the statistics. So you can imagine the supply demand of that service actually becoming much wider. In addition, there's been a vast education push to obtain point of care echoes, whether that's in the emergency department on the hospital or the ICU. However, the pace of technology has been outpacing the level of education. And so that gap between education and being able to use a portable ultrasound anywhere on the floor or in the world has become a problem. And so trying to get people to acquire these images and then interpret them has been a significant issue.
In fact, I would add, Rich, that without confidence equals competency, and competency equals utilization, and utilization equals better patient care. And so what Andrew just spoke about in terms of which is tied to competency, what the problem essentially is, how do you get more people who touch patients competent enough that they can acquire these images where the patient is, when it's needed, so you can make the right decision for that patient, whether it be a diagnostic decision, a triage decision, or a dispositioning decision.
Yeah, and again, it's so commonplace, this approach in the care setting. What's that patient impact? You're coming in just now, are they just not getting enough access, or where are we seeing that sort of pinch point in terms of the patients?
The pinch point is actually the acquisition of the ultrasound itself. Sometimes it can take 2-3 days, especially if the ultrasound is happening on a Friday at 5. Cardiac sonographers are mostly Monday through Friday. And so that patient could be sitting in the hospital waiting till Monday to get that echo. Trying to smooth that process out by other professionals can actually allow patients to get more throughput through the hospital or through the system a little bit faster.
And in some cases, because the sonographer is not there, patients even get discharged from the hospital and asked to come the next day, like Monday morning or the very next day. And what happens is not every patient is local. It's difficult for them to drive hours and hours, sometimes 100, 200 miles to come back and get that done. And so there is a patient experience, there's a patient compliance aspect as well that is tied to patient care, which becomes a part of the problem.
We work with clients that have their patients 2 to 3 hours by car, and for any serious issues are fixed-winged airplane out of the hospital or helicopter to the nearest tertiary care center. Now, the decision to make that transfer, can imagine, is quite expensive. If you can have an echo that can either keep the patient at the main hospital or necessitate know that when you transfer the patient, the services there are actually required, it's a big deal.
Or Andrew, the middle of the night story too, right? Like the hospital system we were talking in the southern part of the country, where there's an alarm that beeps up, and it's a patient safety issue where you want to know what's happening to that patient's heart in the ICU, and are you going to page an attending to come in the middle of the night to do it, or are you going to make a decision with what you have? And the right thing to do is to make a decision with what you have. And so how do you do that if you don't have the right tools and capabilities in place?
Correct.
Kyle, I'm hearing these things that we hear again and again around access. The workforce challenges that we all know about, and we keep on talking about this Philips Future Health Index report that has gone out, spoken to thousands of people across the world in the healthcare system, and you hear it again and again. So I feel like, Kyle, we're kind of primed and interested now to know how UltraSight is looking to solve these issues.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, I think, Andrew and Ramya, you guys definitely have identified a pretty large problem. To Richard's point, we're hearing a lot about, ultrasound technologies and just technologies in general, allowing the learning curve to be a lot faster and easier, especially as younger, more inexperienced doctors and physicians, come into, their new careers. So I guess let's talk about now what UltraSight is doing to help improve outcomes in this area. Tell us a little bit more about your technology.
So UltraSight is an FDA approved product that allows any medical professional to pick up an echo probe and basically guide them into getting high quality scalable echo images at the same quality as an echo sonographer. And we've shown this in one big pivotal study of 240 patients across multiple institutions that shows that the diagnostic quality of these echoes rivals the same diagnostic quality of those cardiac sonographers. And so you can imagine, if that's the case, you can put this in the hands of your medical technician, you can put it in the hands of your nurse, and all of a sudden these images are available for the physician without calling that cardiac sonographer in at 2 a.m. when Ramya mentions that alarm goes off.
Yeah, in fact, I'll give you a little bit more on stats here, Rich and Kyle. There's over 10 million of these scans being done in America. 50% of counties in the United States do not have access to a single cardiologist, which means they don't have access to a cardiac sonographer as well, because they kind of go hand in hand. And over per the American Society of Echocardiography, you only have a couple of tens of thousands of these cardiac sonographers in the remaining 50% of the county, which do have access to these. And so what Andrew just said is so important, because if we can take the medical professionals that are giving patient care in all these places, and with just a couple of days of training or hours of training, if you will, we can get them to consistently and competently acquire these images so clinical decisions can be made, that really is the way to solve the access issue that both of you talked about. So that's really the thesis of how we're approaching this. Our intention is not to replace anybody. Our intention is to augment what is there today so we can close the gap in patient care and patient access.
Let me give you one example. We have 3 abstracts that are being reviewed by a major institution coming up at ACC. In those abstracts, it was 3 undergraduate pre-medical students that trained 6 hours on our software. My residents trained 4 years learning how to do an echo, and even then, the quality can somewhat be so-so. Their quality was able to diagnostically interpret for LV dysfunction, pericardial effusions across 500 patients in a summertime. Now, that's amazing and remarkable.
And your technology, UltraSight, ultimately is a software then?
Correct.
Okay, so tell us how the software integrates with the device.
So the software is an overlay of right now, the Philips Lumify. So you open up our software and then it overlays on top of the Lumify ultrasound device. And so that when you go to scan for an heart, our overlay will direct the user how to move their hand in space to get the image they want. And we do this for 10 different types of cardiac images. And it basically directs the user based on the image shown, how to get to that perfect image.
And when you talk about these overlays, do you have to work directly with Philips, the OEM, or is this some sort of kind of aftermarket implementation type of strategy?
we're always open to working with any hardware OEM, but this is an aftermarket technology, i.e. what the software does is it's very smart enough to take standard image formats that come out of ultrasound machines. These are called DICOM images. And based on those standard images, the software is very smart enough to give you the guidance that you need in real time across space to make the acquisitions. So the intention is that we be able to do this with any ultrasound hardware device that you have, because there's so many of them out there in the market, and you never know what is an easy access of the patient, right? Where the patient is. You can't be running around to say, oh, let me find this particular model of this version so I can do this. You have to be nimble enough that you can work on any hardware. So we took a path of working on standard output images, which in these cases are DICOM images.
And Kyle, it's like incredible the point Andrew was making about the accuracy you've been able to get through your research, against an experienced sonographer, and anyone new can come in and get comparative levels, which is incredible. I wanted to sort of think about the AI aspect, because clearly you're going to be collecting a lot of data. So like, is there a sort of secondary play with that data you're going to be gathering?
Absolutely, yes. So I would say that the secondary play with the data is to make the software better, right? A couple of things. One is to make the software better, so it's much more, it can do more complex acquisitions or more complex use cases as we do. And the second piece that is not FDA approved today that we've been thinking about is on the interpretation side. So you've got the acquisition, and then so that's the what, and then the next question is so what, right? And now what? Now what do we do for the patient, which is really what the interpretation piece is all about. So we're thinking about how does that data apply into making the right clinical decisions for the patients as well.
We want to tell the whole story. The whole story is why the patient is there, and that involves obtaining the images, and then the clinical history integration into that report to say, why did you do this ultrasound? It was to look for ejection fraction. It was to look for a pericardial effusion. And we want to provide that information to the end user as well.
And I guess like any technology, through that workflow integration, there's problems when it's a digital product around cybersecurity and how does that integrate with the EHR? So how are you achieving that or getting past those challenges?
We have a unique solution in that it's a closed system, meaning that the data that's coming from the patient is not integrating into our AI software. So by working in a closed system, we can just be an app on basically an iPad or a Samsung tablet and sit and overlay without integrating any of that HIPAA compliant information into it, which makes it a little bit easier to get integrated through IS security and IT than other platforms.
And the response also is in real time because it's an edge device. The real time response, like we're talking here and there's no latency, there's no jitter, and it's such a seamless conversation. That same experience needs to exist when you're doing patient care on the front lines. You can't be waiting for the time it takes for something to go compute in the cloud and come back, especially when you're looking at access in rural hospitals and in places where access is a real issue. And so the fact that it's an edge device really gives you that real-time reply, and it's a self-contained system. So it's not just for getting across IT challenges and integrating into the PACS, but it's also from a usability and user experience standpoint. I think that's super important.
We want to make it simple. We want to work with the hospital's IT systems or the clinic's IT system and be able to transmit images the same way that they're doing now.
So, Ramya, I know you've joined reasonably recently. I think it's about 3 months you've been with the team, and you're sitting there today joining us from California. Tell us a little bit about your background and what drew you to UltraSight.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've got a passion. I'm an engineer by training, computer scientist, actually, believe it or not. But I have a passion for driving more patient access and patient care by bringing disruptive medical technologies to the market. And we all know in healthcare that takes a long time, right? It takes at least 20 years to drive that, which, by then the technology is already advanced and it's obsolete. So the faster you can get it into the hands of providers and physicians, the faster patients can benefit from it. So that's been a passion of mine. In my prior role, I actually worked on bringing non-invasive brain surgery into the market with another Israeli medtech device company. And when UltraSight opportunity popped up, it was just amazing to think about cardiac care. I mean, if I asked you a question, what kills more women each year? Is it breast cancer or is it cardiac issues, what would you say? Well, most people say breast cancer. Actually, it's actually heart attacks. I mean, 10 times more women die each year from cardiac issues. And this is not to say this technology is just for women, but that sort of gives you a scale of the problem, right? I mean, there is a huge access issue, a huge morbidities, and the faster you can intervene, the faster you can diagnose, the better the outcomes for the patient. And when you think about, here is a way to democratize, the very first tool on that pathway, which is an image of the heart, so somebody can make a diagnostic decision and decide what's right for the patient. That really excited me, as well as the opportunity to work with amazing people like Andrew. We've got a great team here that we're building out. The culture is all about patient first, innovation. All those things are fun things, which brought me here. And it's been a wonderful 90 days and more to come.
That's awesome. And Kyle, you were talking through this. I'm sure that Ramya is really immersed in this and thinking about that go-to-market strategy.
I mean, I'm thinking about that go-to-market strategy too, especially on the heels of kind of now learning more about UltraSight and how it's implemented, with the hospitals, how it's an overlay, how it could be an app. I think that's really interesting. So yeah, what is that approach like? You mentioned that you're FDA cleared, you're FDA approved. And so what, how are you trying to position this with the hospitals today and your ideal customers?
We're thinking about it in three aspects, Kyle. It's a great question. One is patient management in the hospital. So if you're in the hospital floor, if you're in an ICU, you're inpatient essentially. So thinking about it as a patient management tool. The second really is as a patient monitoring tool. So which means that if you are on certain drugs, right, and there are drugs that are cardiotoxic, there are drugs that require frequent monitoring of the heart, and many patients don't have access to these drugs because they don't have access to frequent monitoring. So how can we help monitor the patient outside of the hospital setting when they need this with a certain frequency, or at home, keeping them out of the hospital, right? What do you need to do? And then the last piece is diagnostics and triage. Andrew's experience in the ED, it's all about triage decisions to be made on the patient. Or if a patient is in a cardiac clinic, are you giving enough information to diagnose what the next step for that patient should be, right? As opposed to saying, okay, go home, get an echo appointment, we'll see you in 4 months, right? Because that's how much time it takes if you're lucky to get an echo appointment. So 3 ways we're thinking about in the care pathways are patient management, patient monitoring, and then patient triage/diagnostics. And so our thought process is, where do we fit in those care pathway workflows? And I know Andrew can speak beautifully about that, but thinking about pericardial effusion, thinking about hypotension, thinking about a stroke, moderate stroke, syncope, aortic stenosis, all those diseases or disease states or care pathways where an echo would be a very useful tool either for management, monitoring, or dispositioning of the patient. So that's sort of how we're thinking about our go-to-market. We're also looking at where in the market, right? So is it a rural hospital? Is it a hub and spoke hospital? Andrew spoke about, the transfers that are happening. Are you transferring the right patient or not, right? Or is it even happening in a tier 1, academic center? Believe it or not, there are access challenges there, or in a community setting. So that's the framing with which we're looking. I don't know, Andrew, do you want to add something here? I mean, I kind of feel like that's...
I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, I can get into more granular detail about what type of use cases we see ourselves doing, but Ramya hit it in those 3 major buckets, right? And so diagnostics and triage, whether that's the emergency department, outpatient setting, ICU, you name it, whether that's patient management of known diagnosis on the floor or mechanical support devices, or if it's just drug monitoring or outpatient monitoring of heart failure or hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, whatever it may be, that requires frequent echoes, where access has been the large issue at hand so far.
Yeah, and that's fascinating to me. I mean, I think about kind of your technology, the implementation too of this. It sounds like, or it seems like it's fairly simple too. I mean, what's the undertaking for the hospital to go ahead and implement UltraSight?
You need a Philips Lumify currently, which is just a tablet, Samsung tablet, plus a probe. And they have an app, we have an app, you download it, and you're ready to go. Now, to comply with state regulations, you also need to store the images and be able to document and stuff like that. But you can just do it with those 3 basic principles.
And
training, Andrew, right?
Yeah,
and training.
Okay. But I mean, what's the training like here? I mean, if it's an overlay, this is got to be a pretty simple, straightforward
So
process.
let me frame this, because I think it's good to tell you what we do to train residents right now. We train residents over a month intensive rotation with didactics and hands-on teaching for point of care ultrasound. And this goes for 4 years, and we monitor them with quality assurance. This is 6 to 8 hours of training hands-on, and then you're ready to go. And then we can do quality assurance to make sure that you're doing well and you're utilizing it the correct ways, but it's that simple.
Yeah. And I mean, if, the ROI on this is easier, more efficient, more accessible procedures so that you can deliver these ideal outcomes to patients and help improve treatment time and maybe get people, treated, diagnosed, Ramya, to your points earlier, it seems really beneficial for, again, I whenever I say simple to in healthcare and med tech, simple as if nothing's ever really simple, but the simplicity behind how effective your technology is, and then the implementation and the training, Andrew, to what you just described as, a few hours versus a few years, that's pretty impactful.
I mean, the patient safety alone, being able to diagnose something faster. I mean, we always want to think about the patient first, right? And that's the real reason why we're doing this. Diagnose that critical condition and lead them to intervention faster.
Yeah.
That's the main reason we do this. But you can also imagine when you talk about ROI and the financial implications of this, when it comes to also finding negative findings and then discharging that patient faster that would have stayed in the hospital 3 days. And so all of a sudden your DRG, you're getting a larger portion of that DRG by getting them out faster from that one piece of critical information that you didn't have before.
And what does that economic use case look like? Can you talk about like the ROI in terms of like the timeline? Would you expect to get payback in a year, or what does it look like?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So when I think about healthcare, right, and value propositions, you think about, cost, quality, and access, right? Are you able to solve an access issue here to drive better patient care and outcomes? Is the quality of your solution and the quality of patient care, hence, because of that solution, is that as good as status quo, standard of care, or even better, right? And then the cost aspect of it, which is what you're touching on as well, which is, what is the cost of doing all this, assuming the quality is great and the access is fantastic. And so from a cost standpoint, what this technology does is it enables you to take existing assets. In any healthcare system, the 3 major cost drivers is facility space, people, and hardware technology, right? So this touches on 2 items, which is the people and the hardware. It enables you to take today the current configuration that's FDA approved, and hopefully soon, if the FDA allows it, any hardware that you have, it helps you use that existing hardware, so you drive greater throughput with the existing ultrasound machines that you have, and it enables you to do that with existing staff. So you're also driving greater throughput with existing staff, right? And so the return on investment for this would essentially be in about a 3 to 4 month period is what we project, because again, the only cost for you as a health system is implementing the software on top of existing assets and training and making sure it's integrated into your workflow processes and procedures. So we expect a 3 to 4 month break even on an annual basis because it's a recurring subscription model. It's not a upfront capital expense. And then we also expect the returns to be in the range of 3 to 5x over a period of 2 to 3 years for a hospital.
Well, if I'm listening in and I'm hearing that, it's a no-brainer. I mean, you're hitting all the numbers there. So, what lies ahead for you? So, thinking about the next 12 to 18 months, where are you going and who are you targeting?
Yeah, so for us right now, the goal is to make sure that we put this in the hands of clinicians in real patient care. Andrew and I and the rest of the team are working very hard on that. And we've got early proof points to show that this works. We're trying to now prove that this works at scale. And our goal is to go to those places again, hospitals, where you need patient management in the ICU, large health systems, which are hub hospitals that are receiving transfers from the ED, for example, health systems like that. Rural hospitals, there's about 1,500 of those in America. So critical access health systems and other rural hospitals. And then also home health service companies where you're going to the patient's home because the patient's not able to come to you. This takes away the necessity to put the patient in a vehicle, sort of take them somewhere and bring them back. You can literally just enable somebody to go in there and image the heart and get the information that you need. So that's how we're thinking about it. There's other things, I don't know, Andrew, if you want to talk about, but can we work at scale, in real clinical care?
Ramya's spot on. It's really about putting this into doctors' hands and medical professionals and letting them build the use cases and us augmenting the ones we've already thought about. And so then we'll see how it actually works and how it's utilized in the day-to-day environment of a hospital or home hospital, whatever it may be.
And I heard you mention earlier you're building a team. So, if people are listening in and they want to be part of this journey, is there specific skill sets you're looking for?
We're looking for people passionate about, doing right things for the patient, for clinical apps, account management, training, medical. Andrew needs people on the medical team, medical.
With my other day job, it's still a lot of work.
We need to have a robust publication strategy. So anybody who is nimble enough in a startup, who has the ability to learn, unlearn, relearn, and get things done on the front lines with exciting new technology where it's not a me too, it's not a us too, but it really is driving a new category and, driving a new, I would almost say a new practice. This is all about driving change management in a hospital setting in the interest of the patient, as Andrew likes to say. I think you were the first to point that out to me, that for something like this to succeed, we have to think about it as change management in a hospital setting. And I think you were right, spot on, Andrew. And so somebody who's good at that, and doesn't take no for the first time, just keeps chipping away.
Hey, Kyle, again, I think for anyone listening in, they're going to want to know where to find the UltraSight team. So a lot of opportunity here.
I know, especially, come on, this is a really, in cardiology, to the points you made, Ramya, with your insights on the leading killer, like in the cardiology space, with women, it's pretty insane to think about the impact that you guys could have on the market, the healthcare industry as a whole. And yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of folks out there that are super excited, about where you guys are going. They probably would maybe be interested in joining you on that journey and helping you guys achieve your growth goals. So yeah, how do folks learn more? How do they get in touch?
ultrasight.com, and it was a great place to learn more about us. Drop us a note on LinkedIn, and Andrew and I would be open to chatting with anybody. Or they can email us, and I think we have email addresses on our website as well. We'd love to hear from anybody who's like-minded and who is hungry to drive better patient care.
Awesome.
Well, Andrew, Ramya, it's been absolutely fantastic. I think this is like the right technology at the right time, and I can see this going on a huge trajectory. So super excited for you, and thank you for joining us today.
Our pleasure.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Awesome, everyone. Well, hey, another huge thank you to our friends at UltraSight. We have Andrew Goldsmith, Medical Director, and Ramya Singh, Chief Commercial Officer. So thank you again for joining us today. I'm Kyle Cruz.
And I'm Richard Meiklejohn. Until next time, keep innovating.